Danville, Delegate Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to discuss the successful completion of the Select Committee on School Safety. First, Mr. Speaker, I would like to applaud you for the creation of this unique subcommittee. I was honored to serve as the vice chair of the committee and will take great pride in the work that we did, as well as the final report, which includes 24 priority recommendations. This week, the first bills that were a result of the House Select Committee on School Safety will pass out of the House of Delegates. We are taking steps today to begin the legislative process of implementing a multi-year blueprint for improving school safety. The work of this committee, and specifically the legislation that will come to the floor this week, will have an impact on the safety of our students and teachers for generations to come. For that, everyone now, not only on the Select Committee, but here in this body should be proud. There is nothing more important than the safety of our children, teachers, and staff. Over the past 8 months, this committee worked diligently to create dialogue with key stakeholders, visited countless schools across the Commonwealth, and received nearly 60 draft legislative and budget proposals. Those proposals were narrowed down to a list of 24 priority recommendations for this body, but it's important to note that all 60 are included in the final report. The subcommittee focused pre-aligned our school counselors' duties to better serve students, addressing mental health, behavioral health in schools, and improving training and school security infrastructure, and providing a list of best practices for localities. Every member, Democrat and Republican, devoted considerable time and effort to this initiative, and I want to express my sincere appreciation for that. I want to mention just a few of those proposals, many of which will be voted on this week. First, we recognize the importance of school counseling. A main focus of the committee was ensuring that students had access to counselors that they needed. You see, our report several recommendations that address school counseling. However, I want to emphasize that what I feel is an innovative solution to the issue. We heard that school counselors are too often being tasked with administrative responsibilities, such as coordinating testing, which limits the amount of time that they can spend counseling students. Our proposal has floated around to simply add more school counselors. But if counselors aren't counseling, does it make more sense to add more counselors? The chairman of the Education Committee, the delegate from Augusta, Delegate Landis, is carrying legislation that instead makes a concerted effort to realign the responsibilities of our school counselors, who I remind everyone are specially trained and highly educated, so they spend the majority of their time counseling and less time doing administrative duties. The legislation requires counselors to spend at least 80% of their time actually counseling students. They may create a void administratively, but we believe that it would be better to hire test counselors, coordinators, to coordinate tests and allow school counselors to counsel. We also are highlighting needs to increase funding for the School Resource Officers Grant Program. Resource officers can be the first line of law enforcement defense, but also a vital when it comes to prevention. I am proud of the work we have done in the past year to designate more money for these positions, but still have work to do. Another bill requires the licensing architect or professional engineer who approves plans, all plans and specifications for new or remodeled public school buildings to be trained and experienced in crime prevention through environmental design. We need to make sure that we are focusing on security before the school doors are even open. Security starts with the design of the school, from the layout to office and classroom location to security enhancement. We need to be thinking safety from concept to completion of a school design. And finally, the Select Committee reported stresses to the importance of working together. There sometimes can be hard to legislate, but it's incredibly important to ensuring safety. One example of this is a bill introduced by a delegate from Lunenburg, Delegate Tommy Wright, that requires school boards to include law enforcement, fire, emergency services official in the development of any school crisis and emergency plan. These are just a few of the policies, the recommendations that are now pieces of legislation, many of which this body will vote on this week. I hope this body, both sides of the aisle, as well as a body down the end of the hall, and the governor will all come together to support these pieces of legislation to make our schools a place of learning, development, fun, but all while being safe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.